Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I am Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Ray Kuhn. How you doing, my friend?
I am good. I know this is baseball, but I am going to take my gloating with the Knicks last night. And so far all postseason, I don't know how long it's going to last because now we have to hope on Brunson's foot and Nobi's hamstring. But for now, I'm loving life from that perspective. So I'm going to take my 20 seconds and go for it.
There you go. You could tell me the Knicks won the NBA championship and I wouldn't know any different because I don't follow basketball at all. My brother-in-law who lives with me, like he's been watching and he keeps trying to talk to me about it. And I get this glazed over look that other people usually get when I talk fantasy baseball with them. But yeah, I mean, the Wizards haven't been good in 20 years. So I just have lost interest in basketball altogether.
That's fair. I mean, I will say there is nothing like the Garden in New York when the Knicks are doing good.
I bet it's got to be pretty cool. It's been a while since the Knicks were kind of a really, really strong team. So I'm happy for you. You deserve some happiness around your basketball franchise. One day, maybe the Wizards will be good again, and I'll have some happiness in that regard as well. So, but today we are talking about some FAAB Prep. We're going to talk a little news, some just awful injuries happening over the last few days that we need to dive into. So we'll start with that. And the worst one is the Willson Contreras one, right? He breaks his arm when JD Martinez's swing hits him because somebody in the Cardinals organization told Willson Contreras to stand right next to the batter's ass. Unreal. I mean, talk about what should be considered coaching malpractice, but he's expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks, which likely puts him out after the All-Star break. In a league where your IL spots are filled, are you dropping Willson Contreras?
I think you have to. I mean, I had the same decision in a few leagues with Francisco Alvarez a few weeks ago, and I dropped him everywhere. I think it's a similar situation, if not worse here, because, again, even when he does come back, he broke his arm, so I don't know how the power is going to be when he initially comes back either. So I think that's the other concern of, yeah, he comes back, but at what level will he be able to hit at least initially? So I think, unfortunately, you have to drop him. And I think dropping him for his replacement is probably going to be the way to go.
Yeah, I've got this decision to make in my main event league, which is just a massive bummer because Contreras is having a halfway decent season. Yeah. So, and in a 15-team 2-catcher league, don't have a lot of options. In terms his backup is not available in my main event league, unfortunately. So I'm either gonna have to get a Jake Rogers type, which is just brutal. But this is also something that I don't know that we talk about enough in the fantasy kind of circles. There is definitely a benefit to drafting a catcher highly, especially in a 2-catcher format. Obviously, in a 1-catcher format, this is, I think, an easy drop. And you don't usually invest really highly in 1-catcher formats and catcher. But in a 2-catcher league, the drop off kind of in the tiers are massive and can really make a big difference. But catcher is also the most injured position in fantasy outside of pitcher, right? From a hitter's perspective, catchers get hurt more than anybody else. And it's just something I don't think we talk about enough in kind of fantasy circles. And this is a huge bummer. I'm very torn on what I'm going to do, to be quite honest. I think you are correct, and the right call is to drop Willson Contreras. But man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, at least this first week. I might take a week and kind of figure it out.
I mean, obviously it depends on what other IL guys you have too. Mm-hmm. Again, at this point in the season, I don't think he's the first IL guy for anybody, unless I think the only way that's true is if you drop your other IL guys to this point. And with somebody like Rogers, then you get into the other issue of, okay, yeah, he does have some power. He's going to hit a home run or two, pick up a few RBIs, but at what cost to your batting average? Somebody like Contreras is an asset to your batting average. Now you're going to go completely the other way and kind of tank your batting average. So I think, unfortunately, now based on your team construct, it's another concern other than just simply replacing him.
Yeah, and like for instance, like the guys available in my main event are someone dropped Bo Naylor. I think it's the only league in which Bo Naylor was dropped.
Interesting.
So I'll probably have to go big on him. I mean, Patrick Bailey got dropped because he's on the concussion IL. Jake Rogers, Blake Sable, David Fry, Joey Bart, Reese McGuire. I mean, so there are some options, but not ones that you're like jumping for joy over necessarily.
I mean, Fry's been solid.
Yeah, and he provides the batting average. So I think that's a pretty decent replacement in your deeper leagues.
I mean, even somebody like Bailey, I'm not sure how long the concussion is going to take him to come back from, but at least it's a 7-day on the surface, it's a 7-day stay. So again, you might be forced to take a 0 for half the scoring period, but he might be a halfway decent option also.
Yeah, he was placed on the IL on Saturday. So, and the last report I see is that Bailey is started doing light activity on Tuesday. So we may by the weekend have some information that Patrick Bailey is going to be good for next week, or at least some at some point next week. So that's actually not a bad replacement. Bailey can provide decent batting average, but you're just not going to be able to find in a 2-catcher league. In 1-catcher league, you can probably find pretty decent replacement value. In a 2-catcher league, there's not much you're going to be able to do to replace it. You're just going to have to figure it out for 6 to 8 weeks.
Exactly. Maybe stream a little bit, play matchups, but
yeah,
but you're exactly.
All right, next one on the docket is Encarncion Strand. He goes to the IL with a wrist fracture. I've not yet seen a timetable on him in terms of when he's going to return, but I think this is another pretty easy drop.
Unfortunately, I mean, he clearly wasn't 100% before he came in and went on the IL. He only had 2 homers and was hitting 190. So it's another situation where the body part plays a role here, because it's going to be an extent, even when he comes back, it's going to be probably a little more rampant power. But unfortunately, I think you're going to have to drop him. And from a replacement standpoint, I think you're going to have to look outside of Cincinnati, unless you're in a truly deep league and you think maybe Mike Ford kind of strikes lightning in a bottle with the good home park. But I'm not sure that I would really bet on that.
Yeah, no, I don't think Mike Ford is the answer there. It's we're going to talk about a couple, I think, first baseman, or at least one first base. Oh no, yeah, a couple first basemen that can be potential replacements. In Kyle Manzardo, who made his debut this week, and Jon Singleton. Those are probably the spots that I would go to pick that up. But again, like, especially if you're in a deeper league, it's not as easy. In a 10, 12 team league, there's plenty of first basemen on the wire. You probably shouldn't even rostering Encarncion Strand at this point, with how he's kind of played recently with the injury. So, I think he's a pretty easy drop again. You may want to wait and kind of see a concrete timetable. But if he's going to be out for longer than 6 weeks, which I would assume he would be, I think Strand is a pretty easy drop at this point. Dane Dunning to the IL with a shoulder injury. Another easy drop, right?
I think so. I mean, the word is he's going to be back soon. Shame of it is he was actually pitching really well. He had 43 strikeouts in 37 innings, which is more than we've generally seen from him. But even if it's going to be quick, I think he's more of a streamer guy to begin with, and the Rangers are going to get healthier in the rotation. So who knows how long his time was going to be, regardless of the injury.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love shoulder issues, and those kind of things don't tend to just get better on their own. And usually, even when we see these kind of shorter timetables, we see guys either take longer to get back than originally reported, or we see guys that like re-injure and have more devastating injury down the line. So, I mean, if you want to kind of wait and see, throw him on your IL or kind of just stash him to see if he does come back in 2 weeks, I get it. I don't think he's a big enough difference maker for me in terms of like you necessarily should stash him, right? Even in a 15-team league, like, because Dunning doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, like, he has to volume his way into relevancy to kind of get that effect on your ratios and be eligible for wins. And a guy dealing with a shoulder issue is probably not going to volume in the way that he was before.
No.
Last kind of bit of news is Edward Cabrera also to the IL with a shoulder injury. I think another easy drop here. Were you in on Edward Cabrera? Because it felt like there were a lot of people in the fantasy community that kind of just can't quit this guy.
I was skeptical because, I mean, the strikeouts are the strikeouts. The upside is the upside. But once again, he proved he cannot control the ball. 7 ERA, 1.6 whip. Like, it's just not – like, maybe there's a future he could reimagine himself as a reliever. But it's just not – it's still not working for him yet. So it's an easy drop for me. I don't know how the investment that I had in him was kind of like, oh, let me just grab a flyer on him. And knowing that he'd end up being dropped for one reason or another, now, unfortunately, it's just his health and not if you didn't drop him already because of the struggles.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a big Edward Cabrera guy. Like, I understand why people like see him kind of as a live arm and go, oh man, if he can just command and control things, like, he's going to be great. But he never has been able to, and he also is kind of always dealing with some sort of injury issue. He's always kind of missing time, and so on top of kind of having the spotty command and control, like, he also has just like this injury track record that doesn't really allow him to kind of build up innings in the way they kind of need him to. So I wasn't in on Cabrera. He would be a very easy drop for me. I think he should probably be a pretty easy drop for everybody.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some FAAB Prep. We got some news yesterday. Paul Skenes coming to the majors. It's well overdue at this point. Skenes has been the best pitching prospect in the minor leagues pretty much since he was drafted. He's looked amazing in AAA. How aggressive are you going to get this weekend in leagues where he's available?
I think you have to get aggressive. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody else that's going to come up the rest of this year, pitcher-wise, or pop up on the waiver wire for that matter, that can match what he's going to do. The fact that he's coming up now in the beginning of May also helps. I mean, I think Pittsburgh is going to either go to the six-man rotation or manage his workload, reduce pitch counts, innings, and the like, or maybe both. I mean, even in the minors, he had pitched, I think, 27 innings in like 5 starts or so. So they're going to be cautious. But again, the strikeouts, the upside, it's all there. Granted, AAA, pitching in LSU, it's not pitching in the majors. But to this point, there's nothing more that he could have done at any of those levels before coming up. I mean, I think maybe rough rule of thumb is whatever Christian Scott went for last week, double that. Because I think you're going to have people that missed out on Scott that now are going to be even that much hotter on Skenes. And I think Skenes, unless he truly implodes, is going to be in the rotation for the rest of the year. Scott, we'll talk about him in a little bit. There's no guarantee with him. I think Skenes, as long as he doesn't implode or get hurt, he's going to be in the rotation.
So this is, I mean, he's not available in any of my leagues. Like, there's 0 leagues where he's available picked up. Everybody drafted him, even in the leagues where he wasn't drafted and you could pick up guys off the wire. People already have. So like, there's no way I'm ending up with Skenes. I think I have him on one DC team, just to kind of, just because I wanted to take a flyer somewhere. I completely agree with you. I mean, to me, I think that if any pitcher has the ability to jump straight from minors and be an SP, he just absolutely looks the part. And those of you who have listened to me for a long time know I'm not a big fan of rookies in general. I tend to kind of miss out on a lot of those guys, but Skenes, I think he is the truth. And I think as long as he's healthy, he's going to be a dynamic pitcher. I do agree that maybe wins might be a little harder to get by, and Pittsburgh may not be as good as I originally thought they might be. And then on top of it, you just don't know at their kind of usage, like what kind of pitch count is he going to be on. They've been very conservative with him in the minor leagues. So to me, like, I think in the leagues where he is available, he's going to go for $400 or $500 easy. But I honestly, I don't even know how many leagues where he's actually available in.
Yeah, that is a big question mark.
So I know he's not available in my main, but I'm actually going to check to see like what his ownership percentage in the main event is. He's owned in 100% of main events.
So there goes that.
He was drafted and kept in 100% of mains. So like when I do, like I'll do a main event kind of every week at Fantasy Pros. I write up all like the big main event bids. And he won't even be on the list because he's already previously rostered everywhere. So there you go. The next guy on the list is the aforementioned Christian Scott. Now, he was picked up in quite a few leagues last week. But for those of you who play in kind of non-NFBC worlds and 10s and 12s and stuff, he's going to be kind of a big pickup this week. So let's talk about him. Where are you at on Christian Scott?
I like him. I think he's an interesting guy because he's kind of emerged out of nowhere to a point through the Mets minor league system. He's a little bit older. I mean, he was an early round pick out of Florida. His debut was phenomenal against Tampa. I mean, I think the big thing here is the swing and miss stuff and the ability to limit the walks. He only walked 1 in 6 2/3, struck out 6, only allowed a few hits and 1 run. It's going to be tougher. Tomorrow's his next start against Atlanta. So I think regardless of what you think about Scott, it's probably one of the worst opponents for him. And the fact that Tyler McGill is on his way back. And so figuring if the Mets choose to bring McGill back, it's either Scott or Jose Butto most likely that would go. And Butto's been, surprisingly enough, one of the better pitchers in the big leagues from end of last year into this year. So as much as I want to go crazy on Scott, it's unclear kind of what the Mets are thinking here. I mean, they could ultimately decide to keep McGill in AAA to stretch him out or send Scott back and keep him stretched out in the minors. So I think that's probably the bigger question than his actual performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a performance standpoint, like he has all the tools to be like an SP 2 or 3 this year. Especially with the amount of pitchers we've already lost at this point, and we'll continue to lose. I do think that the innings count is kind of the big question mark. I think that is just something to worry about later on in the season. I would be aggressive. I was aggressive in FAAB, not aggressive enough apparently, as someone dropped $471 on him in my main event, and I wasn't going anywhere near that. To me, like, where are you at on like big FAAB bidding in general? Like, do you tend to get a lot of these guys that go for $200, $300, $400? Just I don't.
Yeah, I think with Scott, I think depending on the league, I was between like 150 and 190 on my bids on him last weekend. I didn't get him anywhere because I think if I knew he was going to kind of be in the rotation all year, and I felt a little safer about it, and there wasn't an issue with the innings limit, I probably would have pushed it higher. But I think at this point, I mean, if you think about it, he's 25 to 30% of your FAAB.
Yeah.
If you go to that level at a minimum, and I think the problem is with all these injuries, it's not because previously it's like, all right, there's the obvious path of the FAAB bids kind of peak. And then the average bid you need goes down towards the end of the season because, I mean, NFBC is a little different animals. People are more generally dialed in. But people start to run out of FAAB. Bids are going to get smaller. But with all these injuries, it's like you can't necessarily take a week off even if you're satisfied with your team because you're probably plugging some hole.
Yeah.
So I mean, it might end up biting me for being more conservative, but I mean, at the same point, I'm not sure there's anyone this year that it's like, I mean, maybe Andy Pages, other than that, I'm not sure there's anyone that it's like, wow, I wish I would have really gone crazy for.
Yeah, like I definitely am bummed that I missed out on Scott, and that, I mean, obviously Skenes won't be wildly available, but like even like a Tyler Black went for like $200, $300 in my league. To me, like I have made the decision, and last year in like my auction championship league, I won it in a large part because I bid $300 on Willi Perez, right? And got him. But it also hamstrung me at the end of the season, man. It just like, it was one of those things where the pack kind of came back to me, and in terms of like the overall, like I was in contention for the overall of the auction championship, which is like a 40K grand prize, right? But I ran out of FAAB. I was in dollar days in the last month of the season, and it really, really hurt my ability to maneuver. And I almost lost that league on the last day. So, it's one of those things where for me, I understand making the move when your team dictates you need to. I think it's way too early to know what your team really needs right here. And I understand that people like go, hey, like if I get a stud for the length of the season, that's going to be way more impactful than getting a guy in July or in June or in August. And I get that, but you're also forgetting about kind of the lost, value that you get being able to make moves in August and make moves in September when you really need to kind of reposition your team or chase a category.
Exactly.
So next guy on the list is Kyle Manzardo. Kind of mentioned him a little bit ago as a potential replacement for Encarncion Strand. Manzardo is a top tier prospect, though I don't know if he's got the fantasy goodness that maybe people expect from a top tier prospect. Where are you at on Manzardo?
Yeah, I mean, I like Manzardo. I think the two things are concerns against left-handed pitching, and then the other thing is that true elite power. Now, granted, he did hit 9 home runs in AAA this year before he got called up, but I'm not sure that I truly buy that as a long-term thing for him to be a true power threat. I think he's a solid piece if you're looking to fill a hole with somebody like an Encarncion Strand getting hurt. I think it's worthwhile. I think batting average will help. Should get some RBIs, but I'm not sure that he's going to be a true difference maker.
Yeah, he's kind of, and I can't remember if it was Paul that said this, but he's kind of like the off-brand or the diet version of teammate Josh Naylor, right? Like, I don't expect him to have Naylor's power, but his ability to make contact without like being powerless, I think is what you're going to see. It's like he's a guy who could hit like 270, 15-ish home runs, hit in the middle of the lineup in Cleveland, which is a better lineup than I think maybe many of us, including myself, gave credit for at the beginning of the season. But like, is he a guy that you're going to look at your team at the end of the year and go, this guy won me my league? No, I don't think so. And I think the combination of like last week's Christian Scott bidding and then this week, Manzardo and Skenes in some leagues kind of bidding will drive up the price. Like people will just Fabapalooza. They're going to be like, well, I'm going to put 500 on Skenes, and when I don't get him, I'm going to put 150 on Manzardo. I think that's a mistake. Like to me, Manzardo is probably more of like a $40, $50 player as opposed to a $500 player.
And I think quite honestly, if he wasn't just coming up from AAA and like he had been established for a year or two and he happened to be on the waiver wire, we're talking about him way differently.
Yeah. I mean, is he really that much different than like an Andrew Vaughn?
I mean, right now, maybe, because Vaughn's struggling, but before the season started, if Vaughn did what we kind of thought that he should do, or Vaughn could get back to doing once he breaks out of it, no, there's no difference. Yeah, and in fact, Vaughn might end up with a few more homers.
And like with Vaughn's struggles, he's ended up on the waiver wire of a number of leagues, right? Like, so like to me, like I wouldn't be going crazy on Manzardo. He's definitely a guy that I target. Like I want to put bids on him. Like, but yes. If people are thinking about going triple digits on Manzardo, which I suspect some people will, then I think they're making a mistake. I think Manzardo is going to be fine. I don't think he's going to be great. And like those of you in 10 and 12 team leagues, like I don't know if he even registers on a lot of those formats.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more of a 15, but again, I think it depends on what's out there on the wire. Because if you're in a league where you need help at the corner and somebody like a Jon Singleton's already rostered, then and if you really have to stress on somebody like a Manzardo, then maybe I can see it. But he's more of an accumulator than anything else at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler Nevin, he's been picked up in a fair amount of leagues already, but he's going to start getting picked up more and more because he's playing really, really well. He's eligible in the at third base and in the outfield. Any interest in Tyler Nevin?
I have a little bit of interest. He's probably going to be in my string. I think he might have been in a string or two last week because he's playing every day and he's hot in Oakland, surprisingly enough, is doing pretty well, and they've become an interesting team. But the problem with Nevin is there's nothing about him that really stands out. Then I'll look at him and say, all right, this at the very least, this guy's going to run and get me some bags, or he's going to really go crazy from a power perspective, although he does have 4 homers already this year. But there's nothing there other than he's going to play every day, and right now the lineup is doing well, and he's doing pretty well. I don't know that I go more than like $40 on him. And I don't know how much upside there is in him.
He is making a fair amount of like in-zone contact, like he's above league average. And there has been some kind of pop in the plate or in the bat, but ultimately I definitely tend to agree with you. One, it's Oakland, so that power is kind of sapped by the just general like park dimensions. And I know that they're like in the top 5 in home runs, like as a team this year. Like I mean, I don't buy that as like a sustainable thing necessarily. I think they've kind of started out hot. We all expect them to be one of the worst teams in baseball. I don't think like the hot start like changes much for that. Like, are we really expecting them to continue to beat up on the Astros? Like, come on, let's be serious here. Like, so that being said, like he is double eligible. I love those guys who can kind of go from infield to outfield because he's eligible at third. He's eligible at the outfield. You can put him at corner, like, in util. So like that's 4 different spots in your lineup. So for me in like, most 15s and some 12s, like he makes a lot of sense as a bench guy, right? As a guy who like, hey, that's one less bench spot I have to necessarily carry where I can go spec on something else, whether it be stolen bases or saves or a starter, because he kind of covers so much ground. And because it's Oakland, I think he's just going to keep playing. Like he's been one of their better hitters. So, he can accumulate. So for those of you guys in leagues deep enough where accumulators matter, he makes a lot of sense. Taj Bradley is working his way back and is probably going to be one of the more picked up guys as guys get ready for his season debut. Any interest in Bradley?
Yeah, I do have interest in him. I mean, I'm hoping that people in my leagues remember the version of Bradley last year where they spent triple digits on him in FAAB and he busted and had a 5.59 ERA. Again, I don't know how much of a difference of a pitcher there is from the one that we bid on before he struggled last year to the one that had a rough spot last year to now what we're seeing this year. I mean, his last rehab started through 94 pitches. So from that standpoint, he's built up. He had 15 Ks in 11 innings, and he only walked 3. I know it's 2 starts, but when we're trying to watch the control and look for some upside here, I think Bradley has the upside. So they were committed to giving him a chance last year in the rotation. He gets a few starts now. I think there's no reason why he can't parlay that into being an interesting option for the rest of the year.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy I want to pick up and stash. One, I'm not starting him tomorrow versus the Yankees. The Yankees are a really good team with a really good offense. And I just don't love starting guys like fresh off the IL because you just never know like how deep they're going to go. Unless they're a stud or have just an amazing matchup, I tend to just kind of bench and wait. The problem is then he gets Boston next week, which isn't a great start either. Though Boston's not as strong as maybe they've been in the past. I think this is like a perfect kind of post-type sleeper situation, right? A guy that everybody was excited about last year. Remember, he was the first starting pitcher kind of that huge wave of rookie starting pitchers to come up. Everybody bid $300 on him, and then everybody regretted doing it. One, that's a reminder of like why we don't bid that much on rookie guys, because sometimes they just flop and you burn that money. But two, like the fantasy community does has like a really bad short-term memory, and they will just remember that he was bad and not that he was a top tier prospect before that. And so if you can sneak him in for like an affordable price, especially in your deeper leagues, but even in 12s, I think right here, I think it's a good gamble to take, because like if that control is legit, and like you said, like he's, so far in his minor league work or his minor league rehab starts, the controls look good. Like Taj Bradley's got really, really good stuff and could be a really, really big difference maker with a lot of strikeouts. And Tampa Bay is not as deep in the rotation as they used to be. So it's not like they've got a lot of options to turn to if he does struggle. So I do like Taj Bradley. I don't want to overspend on him. I don't know what the prices are going to look like, but $40-$50, like I think I can understand making those kind of bids.
Yeah, 100%. I'll probably be there in a good amount of leagues this week.
What about John Means? He's returned from the IL. He had Tommy John that he returned from last year, and then he was kind of just like they said there wasn't really an injury, but he was just kind of slow in his progression and stuff, which is always a bit concerning. But when pitching, John Means has actually been a very good pitcher. Tends to have a home run problem, but that's curbed by the dimensions in this park. Are you in on John Means at all?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I think when he came back September last year, he did really well, but he only struck out 10 guys in 23 innings. So I think maybe that was a little bit of a clue that something still wasn't 100%, or he was just pitching differently since he was coming back, and then he had whatever setback or whatever you want to call it to start this year. But he came back, he threw 7 scoreless in his first start, struck out 8 and 7, and struck out 8. So to me, Means, to your point, has been great. Or not great, but he's been very good when healthy. I had actually grabbed him in a 12-team last week. So I saw him sitting out there. So I think Means could be a very, very good pickup. And if I'm between someone like him and Scott or him and Bradley, to me, there's no comparison. I'm going to go after Means.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, considering what people have been, have spent on a guy like Scott, especially, and might spend this week on a guy like Bradley. I don't think you're wrong. I love John Means. John Means was before, like, we got all these reports that, hey, he's not going to be ready to start a season, that they've, kind of slowed down his progress. He was my most rostered pitcher. I have him on every single one of my Gladiator teams because of that. Like, I just felt like he was a completely underrated kind of asset in drafts early on. And then I stayed away from him because I was just like, this scares the crap out of me when you're dealing with a guy returning, kind of still returning from Tommy John and not being ready to start the season. I wish I hadn't slowed down. I wish I had just kept going, because so far, 7 innings, no walks allowed, no home runs given up, no runs allowed. I mean, he's been fantastic getting strikeouts. I'm a big John Means guy, and I think that especially in this park, like I said, that curbs home runs is his biggest issue. I think he could be massive this year. So if he's available, like I would get aggressive.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about wins either with him on Baltimore.
No, he's got 1 start, went 7 innings, got to win. Like he's one of those guys that, like, he's gonna, anytime he's pitching, as long as he's going 5, and he's gonna go 5 more often than not, he's gonna be eligible for that win, because Baltimore's so damn good, and they're gonna get better, which is fucking crazy.
Yep.
They can make moves either via trade or bring up guys and just keep getting better. So Hayden Wesneski is going to stick in the rotation. Ben Brown is going to go to the bullpen. Wesneski was one of those Fabapalooza guys. I think it was last year. I think it was last year. That kind of disappointed, right? And I myself spent like $95 on him, and then had to drop him 2 weeks later. But it looks like the Cubs are going to give him a chance. He's pitched well so far. Are you interested in Hayden Wesneski at all?
I am. I was interested in him before we had the confirmation that Brown was going to the bullpen. I had taken a look at it, and I actually wrote him up for my waiver article for Fantrax this week, assuming that it would be Brown that would be the casualty when Hendricks came back. And that was before that I saw that Wesneski has 2 starts this coming week. Granted, the first start is against Atlanta, but then he goes against Pittsburgh second start. So I think it kind of balances itself out. And I think he got last year, he worked out some kinks. Not saying he's going to be an elite guy or someone even with the upside of someone like a Bradley, but I think he can be a solid rotation piece. He's only allowed 2 barrels this year against. Ground ball rate's up a little bit to 46%. He's walking 1.5 guys per 9. So I think those are both good, kind of some good things to take note of there. Cubs are an interesting team. Cubs are playing well, decent chance at a victory. So I think he can be a good rotation piece for the rest of the year. Strikeouts might be a little hairy, but I think those might come.
Yeah, right now he's allowing a lot of contact in zone, 94.5% zone contact right now, which is extremely high, like uncharacteristically high for a guy like Wesneski. So the strikeouts, that'll need to change. He'll need to like get some swing and miss inside the zone if he wants to get strikeouts. But so far, he's pitching really well. He's inducing a lot of weak contact. The Cubs are letting him go deep into the game, which is something he never really did last season, and is really, really intriguing. I love Wesneski's stuff. I mean, for those who don't remember, like he was like one of those big like sleeper guys for deeper leagues coming into the year last year, and then just didn't make the team out of camp. So another one of these kind of post-hype guys that I think is really interesting that I would take a gamble on, especially in 15-team leagues, but even some 12s I think makes a lot of sense. Johnny Deluca was another one of those kind of common sleeper kind of guys coming this season, but he got injured towards the end of spring training. He's just kind of been activated recently, and he's playing a fair amount in Tampa Bay. This is a former Dodgers prospect that just really, very similar to like Michael Busch, couldn't like crack the lineup because the Dodgers were just so damn good. Gets traded in the offseason. Any interest in Johnny Deluca?
I think there's some. I mean, we know Tampa loves to platoon. When they get in that situation, Deluca is going to be on the weak side of that as a right-handed batter. So far, he's been playing every day, and he's hitting 350 in 23 plate appearances. So he's working out to this point. He has 10 RBIs. There's not much. I mean, to me, I kind of compare him to you compare him to Busch, and I think maybe it's a similar skill set. A little bit of power. I think he has less power than Busch, maybe a little more speed. So there's some interest, but I don't think he's going to be. Maybe he's the outfield version of Manzardo with a little less power.
Yeah, I think that's not actually a bad comparison. I don't know if he's got the contact skills of Manzardo. I think Manzardo is a much better pure hitter. But so far, Deluca's looked pretty good, and he's been a pretty decent defender, which, is kind of important when you're on the Rays, especially, right? Like, if you can defend and not strike out, the problem with, Jose Siri, who's been playing over a fair amount, is, Siri is a fantastic defender, but dude strikes out nonstop. And I think at some point, especially when the Rays are already playing guys like Med Rosario, who's a terrible defender, and they were playing Curtis Mead before they sent him down, who's a terrible defender. You can't compile all these bad defenders on your team, especially when you're a team like the Rays, who don't have a prodigious offense to kind of carry you past their defensive mistakes. So I think the fact that Deluca is an adequate or to above average defender, and he doesn't strike out, is really going to work in his favor here. I'm not a big fan of his skill set. I think he is an accumulator for the most part, because I don't think he has prodigious power or is a burner by any stretch of the imagination. But if he can continue to play every day, I think he could be pretty valuable, especially in your 12 and 15 team leagues. The problem is you need to keep a really close eye on a guy like Deluca, because the Rays, like you said, love to platoon. And if he does platoon, he's going on the short side of the platoon. And that would be a really, really bad spot for him. Next guy on the list is Willi Castro, who's probably owned in most 15-team leagues, but I put him on the list because he's been one of the more picked up players in 10-team leagues and 12-team leagues recently, and for good reason why. Willi Castro has been fantastic recently. I think he gets hidden a little bit, kind of considering where he plays in Minnesota, and he wasn't considered even like a guy who's going to be a full-time player necessarily coming into the season. But it's Minnesota, where everybody gets hurt. You've got Byron Buxton, you've got Alex Kirilloff, you've got Carlos Correa, guys who just can't stay on the field. And so I was a big fan of Castro as kind of a sneaky pick because it was like he's going to find playing time eventually. I mean, Royce Lewis, right? He, made it like 2 games in the season before getting hurt. Are you picking up Willi Castro in your shallower formats?
I am, because the versatility helps. He's getting the playing time now. He's hitting 346 in his last 7 games. I don't think that continues, but 3 stolen bases in that stretch. So if you're looking for speed, then I think that's the reason why Castro is so widely owned when you get into 15-teamers. So I would pick up Castro.
Yeah, he's definitely a speed asset. We're talking about a guy who last year stole 33 bases in 409 plate appearances. He's already got 3 home runs, 5 stolen bases this year. Hitting the ball well this year, 273 batting average, which is, backed up by an 86% zone contact and swinging strike rate of 13%. Like, he may not keep a 270 batting average all year, but I think he's the guy who can hit 260 and steal 30 plus bases, which is fantastic off the wire, even in a 10-team league. Not to mention, dual eligible again, another one of these guys who's eligible, I think, at third and the outfield. He's going to pick up shortstop eligibility in most formats here very, very shortly if he has, or actually, no, never mind. He already has shortstop eligibility in most formats. So, another one of these guys, like we were talking about earlier, that, in Tyler Nevin, who he may not go into your lineup every day or, every week in your weekly leagues, but on your bench, like, he can fill so many spots. And we're talking about all these injuries around baseball this year. Having a guy who can cover 3, 4, 5 spots is amazing.
100%. Totally deepens the roster. The fact that he's hitting for a good average, I think it should put him on your radar. If he's not there already.
Another one of these guys that we kind of forget was like a top prospect. He was like a top 50 prospect at one point. And, didn't quite work out in his first couple spots, but it's really working out in Minnesota. Uncle Ted spamming the chat as he always does, but he nailed this one because we're going to talk about Wenceel Perez. Wenceel Perez is, a Tigers guy who's been called up recently. He's got 3 home runs, 2 stolen bases, hitting 286, 366, 508, eligible in the outfield. Any interest in Wenceel Perez?
A little bit. If you go back through his minor leagues, there hasn't been a ton where it's like, wow, this guy is a true power or speed threat. Right now he's playing every day and he's batting at the top of the order. So I'm bat third. He batted second the last few games. So I think that counts for something when you get into 15-teamers. I'm not sure that I would go after him in 12 to me, but I think there's something there. But I feel like this is a situation where in a few weeks he could be like, all right, that's an easy drop because he's cooled off.
Yeah, to me, he's definitely one of those guys you're going to have to watch, but he's got above average speed. And he's making pretty decent in-zone contact, 87% in-zone contact, a 9% swinging strike rate, which tells me, like, hey, if you can keep that up, like, maybe the strikeouts won't be a problem and he can get on base a fair amount. Like you said, he's hitting towards kind of the top half of that lineup, which isn't a bad lineup generally speaking, but it hasn't been great by any sense. And I totally agree with Uncle Ted in the chat right here, right? You're going to ride it until the wheels fall off. I do think the wheels do fall off at some point, but he's an accumulator, and right now he's being given an opportunity to accumulate. This is one of those kind of short-term streams that where if you see the strikeout rate start to drop, you start to see playing time loss, you drop him. But getting a guy that has speed like he does and isn't a zero in the power department, he already has, like I said, 3 home runs, like, I'm here for the Wenceel Perez kind of bandwagon, at least for a little bit. I'm definitely going to be jumping off the bandwagon the moment it starts to slow down, though.
Yeah, I think you have to be prepared for that, and I think that should dictate your investment. That's kind of the only problem, because if you're, I mean, obviously you don't pick up guys with the intention of dropping them, and you don't hang on to people because you bid X amount of money on them.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I would just keep that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. For me, like, I'm one of those guys, like, I don't do it every time. Like, I really, I really need to be better and better about this. But like, I try to have as short a term memory as possible, right? Like, in terms of like someone's draft cost, or what you spent on them in FAAB, right? Like, because that cost is already over, right? Like, you're not getting that draft pick back. You're not getting that money back. So you shouldn't be tied to him in a way where you go like, hey, well, I spent $200 on this guy. I've got to hold on to him even though he's struggling. No, you don't. You got to do what's best for your team, so that way you can keep moving up the ranks.
Because then you're hurting yourself at that point. Then once you draft him, once you FAAB him, that's a sunk cost. That's gone, and then all you have is opportunity cost going forward, and then you don't want to eat into that.
Absolutely. But I'm here for some Wenceel Perez. Love to see that. Let's finish out with Jon Singleton. Kind of mentioned him earlier as a Christian Encarncion Strand replacement. Jon Singleton's a former top prospect for those of you who haven't been playing fantasy for a decade. He's in his 30s now, but he was one of those first guys that kind of got like a long-term deal to eat out the arbitration so they could bring him up, and then he was awful. Like, it was one of those deals where at the time it's very similar to like the Ozzy Albies deal, where at the time like people were like, what's he doing? Why is he selling himself short? This is a can't miss prospect. This is why some of those guys do sign these deals, because it actually he's one of the really good examples of like, hey, he got paid and it worked out because he actually wasn't very good. But he's had a late kind of career resurgence. He's 30 years old. He's only really playing now because Jose Abreu was so atrocious that they had to send him down. But he's playing every day. There is pop. He's playing well. Are you picking up Jon Singleton?
Yeah, I would definitely throw a few bucks on him. I think the key here is that he's playing every day, so he can kind of, I mean, this is the first time in his major league career where he's really getting everyday playing time. Say what you want about the Astros, it's still a strong lineup. He's middle bottom of the lineup, so he's in a decent RBI spot, see some pitches to hit. We know that there's some power. I think now, after Abreu went to the minors, that we're truly seeing Singleton settle in to more of a regular role. I think that will help him find a little bit of a groove, and he can very easily run into a few home runs a week if he gets hot, right pitching, right situation, driving some runs. Batting average is going to be a little bit hairy, but I think the run production will be there.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely kind of a all or nothing type of dude, right? Like, he's hitting 239, I think, but his XBA is 230. Like, so like he kind of deserves this crappy batting average. The one thing he does do is strike the ball extremely hard. His max exit velocity is in the top 4% of the league. He's got a pretty darn good average exit velocity rate. He's, the barrels, they're kind of hit or miss. He's about 8%, which isn't great, but like it isn't atrocious either. So he is kind of an all or nothing kind of dude. He is making decent contact in the zone, like ran 89% zone contact. So for a power hitter, you kind of love to see that. He's going to strike out probably at a 28, 29% clip. You're not going to get batting average, but he's hitting in a decent spot in a great lineup. He's got a ton of power. I think this is a 15-team play at best, but I think in 15-team leagues, he probably should be rostered in every league.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's going to wrap us up for this episode. Ray, want to remind everybody where you can reach the social media and plug anything I got going on?
You can find me at Ray_Kuhn_28 on social media. And I have my weekly Fantrax article where I go in a little bit deeper into some waiver wire claims. And I'm also going to be starting up a series where I take a look at some numbers based on like Bauer rate, some StatCast metrics, and take a look at them in the realm of specific players and whether we should kind of buy or sell or hold on those players. And I know this is baseball, but I'm starting up some football content as well over at Fantrax and at Dr. Roto for the upcoming season.
There you go. You can reach me on all the social media apps, Justin Mason FWFB, YouTube, and Twitter, probably my most commonly posted places, but I'm on all of them. And then you can read my written work at Fangraphs, where I'm writing 5 days a week, and at Fantasy Pros, where I'm writing 3 days a week, and I'm on this podcast and the Sleeper in the Bus podcast. That will wrap us up for this episode. For Ray and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.